Hi, this is Erin O'Reilly with Art2Ride, and today I wanted to give an update on Rein. I posted a video back in September of 2018 that sort of went through our journey with Rein over the past few years and showed Rein's owner, Lily, riding him from, I think it was early 2017 up until the end of the summer 2018. So if you haven't watched that video already, I would encourage you to go and take a look at where this horse came from, because there is a pretty drastic change in his movement from the first couple of clips in that video to where he is now. There is quite a difference even from the end of the previous video I posted to where he is currently. Lily did a fantastic job with him while I was away from the beginning of September to mid-December, and I was very pleased to see that he was even stronger when I got back than he was when I left. And so here you see me doing some work in hand with him. He responds really well to the in-hand work now, and I find it very useful to get him to start to move away from my inside leg or the whip here in the in-hand work and start to take up a connection with the outside rein. He is a horse that has always been very straight moving in his body and in his hind legs. But he does find it difficult to really bend around turns and that sort of thing. So I find the work in hand useful to help him with that. He actually used to constantly have his head to the outside, no matter if you were riding or lunging or whatever. And so now he never does that anymore, which of course is because the fact that he's connecting over his back. We always say that a horse won't be able to bend laterally until they start to bend longitudinally, and that was very, very evident with Rein. But now you see that he's finally starting to be able to bend going around turns and through leg yields and that sort of thing, and actually step over with his inside hind. You can see that he moves a little bit crooked behind at times, which was a whole lot more extreme before he started and really got into the Art2Ride program and started to move over his back and that sort of thing. But I remember thinking at one point that I really didn't ever think that this horse would actually be able to cross over. But now you can see that he's starting to do that really nicely, and is quite happy to move forward and reach into the connection with the bridle. And he's quite easy actually to do the work in hand with now, which is great because he used to have a lot of fight in him, but he's clearly realized that it feels so much better for him to be here. So it's pretty easy for me to get him to a good place, and he comes out and just relaxes, which is a big deal for him. He used to be a lot more distracted. He was never really dangerous or anything like that, but he was high-headed and distracted, and certainly didn't start out as the quiet, easygoing, willing to please horse that you see here. And so I don't do a whole lot of work in hand with him. I kind of just get him to come out, get him to start swinging over his back, and start to feel that he's coming into the connection with the outside rein. He also does have a little bit of a tendency to hang on the right rein more so than the left at times. So coming down that long side there, you just seen me really trying to step him over from the inside leg aid and into the connection with the outside rein. And you seen me let go of my inside rein there a couple of times just to test that he wasn't relying on it too much as he sometimes does. But as Will always says, the horse will never feel right in the bridle until they are moving correctly over their back, which Rein started to do quite nicely there in the work in hand. So I was happy with that for that day. And so then I moved on to some work on the lunge line. You can see that we do still have rein in side reins, not because it's 100% necessary. I've lunged him many times with just a bridle as well, and he does quite well with that, but it does take him a little bit longer to really focus without the side reins. Um, and also, I find that Rein really does look for the connection with the bit now, and with the side reins there, that gives him the ability to really reach down and connect with the bridle. And so I find he does still go a little bit better with the side reins to give him that consistent connection to reach into. We've also started to bring rein up a little bit, and by using the side reins and attaching them to the D-rings on the saddle, we can bring him up on the lunge line and start to strengthen him in a little bit of a higher position without having the weight of a rider on his back, to help him stabilize in the working gaits with a rider on him. I don't show that here today, but he does quite well with that as well. And so you see here that I've just moved him into the trot. In the beginning, his trot tends to not come through quite as well as it does once he gets warmed up. He had some back issues before he started Art2Ride, and had some saddle issues at times throughout his life, and so he sometimes starts just a little tight through his back. Now he's getting better and better all the time, and this is certainly not a bad way to start out here. I like how he's moving forward right from the beginning and starting to swing in under his body, and there wasn't a whole lot of fight in the trot in the beginning. This is a horse that had no problem flipping himself completely upside down in previous years. And so he still has that tendency a little bit sometimes when you first send him into the trot. But here he kind of just moved right into it. He was a little bit bracy in the beginning, wasn't quite reaching down as deeply as I would like to see, and therefore his hind legs weren't really swinging under his body enough to get him to start to connect over his back. But as he goes on here, that's starting to happen nicer, and I'm happy with the fact that he is just staying nice and relaxed about all of this work. You can see that he is starting to take the shape of the circle, and that is a huge deal for him as well. As I mentioned earlier, he used to always want to twist his head to the outside. And the canter is coming along quite nicely. I was pretty happy with that transition there. It was one of the nicer ones that I have seen him do on the lunge line. He didn't try to invert for the transition. He just continued to flow forward and moved right into the canter, and had a nice stretch there happening in the canter as well. He maybe could have been a little bit more active and reaching a little bit deeper, but like I said, there was a lot of good things about that too. That was one of the nicer canter transitions that I've seen him do on the lunge line so far, so I was really happy with that. And came back to a nice swinging active trot, and where he was relaxing down and seeking that connection with the bit afterwards. So that was enough for that direction for today. All I really want to see with the lunging is that he comes out and he relaxes and he starts to get in the zone a little bit and activate the correct parts of his body. And he did that quite nicely in that direction. So that's all I needed to see. Rein is also a little bit stronger to the left than he is to the right, which is why I started him on that rein. However, he is starting to even out more as he gets stronger overall. I was quite happy with how he lunged in this direction as well today. This is the direction that he really wanted to twist to the outside. And still does a little bit at times. If you watch that last video that I posted from 3 or 4 months ago, you can see that he really was still wanting to twist his head to the outside and fall in with his body to the inside in this direction. And that has improved quite a lot over the last few months. So we're really happy about that. Again, as we know, that really was just a result of him not engaging over his back. So once you get the horse to start to do that, then all of those things tend to just fall away, which is exactly what's happening here with Rein. So you see here he's starting a little more stuck in this direction. He's moving a little more straight with his hind legs. He's not really swinging in under his body as much as he was in the other direction, and there's not as much of that circular movement through his hocks. But that gets better here as we go. It's just a little bit more difficult for him to get there in this direction. And so to help him start to activate a little bit more behind, I'm just encouraging him to step out away from me on the circle and start to swing through a little bit more and start to reach a little bit deeper into the connection with the bridle. I also add a little canter in here to help him with that. He's strong enough now to for the canter to be beneficial in itself, but it also helps him to start to swing through a little bit more and to start to loosen up a little bit more. In the canter, you can still see he is probably where he most has that tendency to lean in and to fall in to the inside, but that wasn't bad. This was his more difficult direction for that, so it wasn't quite as nice as the canter in the other direction. But you can see here that it does help for him to start to really connect over his back and to activate his hind legs a little bit more and to get a little bit down deeper into that stretch. So I was quite happy with what he gave me here on the lunge line on this day, and that's really all I needed to see from him before getting on. So this was the start of my ride on this day. You can see here that he just goes right into the stretch now, which is great. As I said before, he's the type of horse that really did want to invert and drop through his back until he really realized how much easier it was for him not to do that. And so starting out here in the walk, I'm just really starting to establish that swing from behind, starting to encourage him to move off my inside leg, and going to work him through some leg yields here. Those are something that he still does struggle with a little bit at times. He's getting much, much better, but he, as I said before, he has always been a very straight mover. So anything that requires him to bend through his body has always been a little bit of a difficult thing for him. But I mean, his walk is just so much looser now than it ever has been before. So the quality of those are getting better and better all the time. I try to do some with circles and getting him just moving out and off of my inside leg around circles, as mentally he does a little better with that. Um, he was a horse that if you put your leg on him at all in the beginning, he would just rush forward. He had no idea that your leg also meant to move laterally. And so I think when he's moving from the center line over to the track and there's a big straight line in front of him, he does have the tendency to want to rush still a little bit, but as he goes on, he gets better with those, and they're getting better and better all the time. I'm starting to feel that he's shaping my inside leg much better when asking for those and actually bending through his body as he moves over, Whereas in the beginning, the goal was really to just get him to move over towards the track. Now you're really starting to get a feel for him shaping the inside leg, which makes a great difference. So I'm quite happy with that. But incorporating him moving out around on circles, I find really helps for him because when he's on a turn, he doesn't so much really want to rush. So in the beginning, when he's kind of loosening up those muscles that he uses when he moves laterally, it helps to ask him for some on the circle as well. So a couple of really nice steps there. He's starting to cross over a little bit bigger in the back end as he moves over towards the track, which I'm happy to see. And he's staying relaxed through those a whole lot easier now as well. It used to be a little bit of a struggle to get him to not brace when you put your leg on, but that's happening better and better all the time, so quite happy with that. And so he had a couple of really, really nice steps there in the first direction, so I'm just moving on to the second direction here. And I think in this direction, he had a little bit more trouble on this day, but still not bad. And I really like here how he's consistently moving forward and maintaining the connection with me. I'm trying to have him take up a little bit more connection with the outside rein as I move him around here. That's something that really helps him to bend around my inside leg, is to really give him that connection with the outside rein and to maintain that feel that I'm sending him from my inside leg and into the connection with the outside rein. And as I talked about with the lunging work, you can see here that he really does reach for that connection with my hand, which is quite nice to have him looking for that more and more. And so that's what I mean about him getting a little bit tense. I mean, it's not bad. He still does move off my leg, but I would like to see him stay a little bit more relaxed and just flow over to the track. So I'm going to work him through a couple of those and see if I can get a little bit of a softer response from him, which we do get to. But for whatever reason on this day, he was just a little bit more bracy about moving off my left leg than off of my right. But even through that, what really mattered was that by the time that we got through the leg yield and after the leg yield, he always continued to come back to that really nice deep stretch and that nice swing through his body. So regardless of if he got a little bit tense about moving off my leg, that's really what I was looking for, is that good reaction from him afterwards to come back to that place where he is just comfortably swinging through. So I was happy with that, how where that leg yield got to there at the end. You've seen that he got a little bit bracy in the beginning, but I just continued to ask him, didn't make a big deal about it. And as he went through the leg yield, he got more relaxed and started to reach deeper because of that. And so I just do one more little one on this side of the arena, and he doesn't get tense about it at all. He just moves off my leg. I would like to see him maybe leading a little bit less with the shoulder in those. He left his haunches behind a little bit more than what I ideally would have liked there, but because he was getting a little tense about it on this day, I wanted to really stress the fact that I wanted him to be relaxed about that. And so I made it a little bit easier for him just to, I guess, train his brain a little bit more than his body in that moment, because you can't get that really true swing through the body and the quality in, I guess, in the leg yield and in the gait without the relaxation anyway. So I chose to favor that in that moment. And so as we move into the trot here, he's just a little bit tense in the beginning. So it's not bad. I like how he's really swinging forward and that he's starting to reach into the bridle, but it was just a little bit more tense there in the beginning than what I would have liked to see. So I'm just taking my time to work him through that. As I said before, he's a horse that spent a lot of his life doing the opposite of moving over his back. So he still has those moments where he might try a little bit to get tense and invert, but they're very few and far between at this point because he really has realized that it's so much more comfortable for him to use his back and to not hollow it out, and because of that he's becoming more and more easy to work with and more relaxed and really starting to be a willing partner, which is great to see. And so I'm just working to get him all the way out and down into the stretch here. He's sort of a horse that sometimes you have to work backwards with a little bit. There's times as I work through the warm-up in the trot here that I am riding him on a little bit of a shorter rein, a little bit closer to a working trot. And the reason for that is that he takes a little bit to really start to move away from my inside leg and start to come through his body. And so instead of just solely focusing on getting him to stretch all the way down in the front end and losing the connection from the back end, I'm choosing to work him on a little bit of a shorter rein, nothing that he's not strong enough to do, and really starting to get him to move away from my leg and continuing to ride the hind end forward so that he becomes more connected and then reaches down because of the connection over his body and not just because he's putting his head towards the ground and not connected from the back end. And so then when I do get the stretch, it's a lot more beneficial because it's coming from the back end of the horse, not just because he's reaching his head and his neck towards the ground without that connectivity from behind. But you can see that he's starting to come together quite nicely here already, starting to relax and flow through his body much nicer. That's one of the things that's really fun about this horse now, is that he really has an engine behind him, which he never did before. So it's just energy that you can direct around the arena as you ride, and it just feels like there's a really nice flow to how he's moving around the arena now, which was never really there before. So even when he does come up out of the stretch or maybe fall in a little tiny bit, or there's something happens that I want to correct, it's never that he's shutting down behind. So there's always much more of a connection over his back than there ever was before. And that's something that I found through working in this way that is something that I always search to find, because that way I know that you're dealing with a horse that has enough energy coming from behind to really push up through their back, regardless of the length of the rein that they're on. That is really only true of a horse that is strong enough to get connected over their back, but once you get to that point, it's really fun. And so as I'm moving him around some circles here, I'm kind of doing the similar thing as I did in the walk and really looking for him to start to step away from my leg and shape the circle. I don't ask him for any leg yields from the center line to the track or the quarter line to the track on this day in the trot. I do those with him and he does quite well, but just because he was a little bit bracy in the walk, I'm utilizing what we get from the leg yield, which is that step over from the back end, by getting that on a circle rather than opening the door to start fighting with me, moving over from the center line to the track today, because I figured that that might happen. And so here you see me actually bring him up into a little bit more of a working trot for a couple of circles, and then start to let him right back down in the stretch again. That's something that really he's only started doing over the past maybe 3 weeks, three and a half weeks since I've gotten home. His owner, Lily, said that she felt like he was ready to start coming up while I was gone, but she had never ridden a horse up in the working gaits before, so she wanted to wait for me to get home to start that with him. And even in the first ride that I had, I felt that he was ready to start that, so I started to play with bringing him up, and he did so quite well, which absolutely astounded me, to be completely honest, because the idea of being able to shorten your reins on this horse for a long time was something that I didn't know it was going to be possible anytime soon anyway, because he absolutely would just completely shut down the back end and fight and fight and fight and fight with you if you tried to do that. And so we haven't tried to do that in quite a while. Since he really started in this program, because there was no point to it, and obviously we wanted to prioritize him moving over his back. But now he is strong enough that he's actually been one of the easiest horses that I've ever started to bring into the working gaits. He is quite happy to just come up and continue to flow forward. You see that the rhythm doesn't really change, and he just continues to reach into the bridle when you ask him to do that. So it was probably one of my favorite moments that I've had in training horses so far, was the first time that I asked him for that, and he did so well. It really confirmed to me, not that it wasn't confirmed before, but it confirmed to me that this is the way to do things for sure. And so I was also quite happy with that canter work on this day. He came up a little tiny bit through the transition, but nothing major at all, and he just softened right back into my hand once he got into the canter, and I could feel him really connecting underneath me, and he was shaping the circle quite nice actually there in that direction on this day, which is still, as I said before, something that's a little bit difficult for him. So I just asked him for a little tiny bit of that, and then brought him back into the trot and put him right back into the stretch, because I was quite happy with how he did that, and I wanted to reward him for that. And then I'm going to do a little bit here in this direction, and same thing again. He just, tossed his head up a little bit in the transition, which I just allow him to do that and move him into the canter, and then as he gets stronger, those transitions will get nicer, but it's not anything I'm worried about right now. And again, quite happy with his canter work in that direction today. So just moving him right back into the trot and putting him back into the stretch to reward him from that. The canter is something that he isn't really just starting with, but it's something that we haven't done a whole lot of at this point, because it was always something that he struggled with, so we just wanted to build him up in the trot first. But now the canter is coming along quite nicely as well because of that. And so we're starting to build on that a little bit more as we go. But for now, I'm quite happy with how he did that. And so bringing him back into a stretch in the trot again. And you can see that how as the ride goes on, it gets easier for him to really connect through his body in the trot. And so his rhythm gets a little bit better. You see a little bit less run in the trot and a little bit more lift. And so in feeling that, I brought him up into the working trot one more time, which he did again quite effortlessly. There was no change in his rhythm. He continued to flow forward from behind and just followed my hand up onto a shorter rein, staying soft and sitting into it, and then proceeded to follow my hand back down and into the stretch. So I was happy to finish him here for this day. Thanks for watching.